Hi, my name's Analisa Six, and I run a blog called The Lady of Leisure because I am a Leo, and I thought the play on words, Lady of Leisure to Leisure, was hilarious, which I'm sure I'm the only one that thinks it's that funny. But I am here to talk about having chronic fatigue syndrome and getting that diagnosis in August of this year after experiencing a decline in my health since I guess the end of 2019, but it really took a dive in 2020. So I'm going to talk about that. And I kind of wanted to start out with just kind of giving a little bit of background on me before we get into what chronic fatigue syndrome is and what it's like to have it. So I am a professional dog trainer and dog walker. I am also a professional astrologer and tarot reader. I currently live in Yucca Valley, which is near Joshua Tree, and I've been living here since 2020. I have not worked since October 31st of 2022 due to this illness. I started the Lady of Leisure as kind of a creative expression around this illness that I didn't know what it was. I assumed it was fibromyalgia, what was happening to me. And I'm one of those people where when I'm dealt a hand in life, I do try to turn lemons into lemonade. I'm very much that person. I'm a very PMA person. I try to be very positive. I try to be optimistic. I'm a very spiritual person, and I'm extremely into health and wellness. Prior to these health issues, I was looking at becoming a wellness coach, or a certified nutritionist. I decided to go the spiritual route and focus on my astrological practice. And I also became a certified dog trainer because I love working with animals. And so there's a lot I want to talk about in terms of the fact that my illness was diagnosed when I was already somebody that was very health conscious, which is not always the case. But I also kind of wanted to preface this with the fact that that's kind of what Lady of Leisure has been born out of. So Lady of Leisure is a blog where I predominantly just post my horoscope and astrology videos, but the goal that I kind of had for it was that I also wanted it to be a platform where I could express kind of what I'm going through with my illness, but in a way that is helpful for other people while also not kind of oversharing too much about myself in a way that feels not inauthentic, but like there's a balance, I feel like, when you're talking about your own medical stuff where you need to kind of be protective over it, because I think one of the things that's really not helpful when you're navigating a chronic illness is other people's suggestions. And I know that that sounds kind of weird, but a lot of people in my camp we've been through and tried a lot of things, and we've done a lot of research because we've had to. And so by the time somebody's suggesting something to me, most times I've already tried it, or I'm doing it already, or I've done it and it doesn't make a difference. And so I'm just kind of prefacing this by asking, if you're watching this, please don't reach out to me with suggestions unless you yourself have chronic fatigue syndrome that you have been navigating for a long period of time. And if you have suggestions and you have my illness, I am open to it. If you have never had my illness, please don't suggest anything to me. Please, 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 just don't comment, don't suggest. I'm very burnt out on kind of a lot of things in that realm. And I'm saying that with love, because I know a lot of times the suggestions are coming from a place of love and genuinely wanting to help, but a lot of times it's not helpful. So Lady of Leisure is a take on Lady of Leisure. I've been forced into a Lady of Leisure due to chronic fatigue syndrome, and I'm trying to be positive about it, but it's very frustrating. So what is chronic fatigue syndrome? Let's just look and see what the CDC has to say as a nice little intro into this video. It's an interesting illness. I didn't know anything about it until I started to research fibromyalgia, because when I started to have symptoms at the end of 2019, I was pretty convinced what was happening to me was fibromyalgia. So I learned about chronic fatigue syndrome through researching fibromyalgia. Did not think that I had chronic fatigue syndrome, was pretty positive it was fibromyalgia. Got diagnosed with chronic fatigue syndrome and was just like, wow, I did not think that that was, I wasn't surprised that it was chronic fatigue syndrome. I just didn't think that I was going to get as severe of a diagnosis. I felt like I'm doing so well in comparison to most people with chronic fatigue syndrome that I just thought I would get a fibromyalgia diagnosis, but I have both things going on. So chronic fatigue syndrome is a disabling and complex illness. People with it are not able to do their usual activities. At times, CFS may confine them to bed. People with CFS have overwhelming fatigue that is not improved by rest. It may get worse after any activity, whether it's physical or mental. The symptom is known as post-exertional malaise. Other symptoms can include problems with sleep, thinking, and concentrating, pain, and dizziness. People with CFS may not look ill, however. We are not able to function the same way that we did before we became ill. We are not able, or our ability to do daily tasks like taking a shower or preparing a meal changes. Often it makes it hard for us to have a job or go to school or take part in family and social life. It can last for years and sometimes lead to serious disability. At least 1 in 4 CFS patients is bed or housebound for long periods during their illness. It's estimated that almost 2.5 million Americans suffer from CFS. About 90% of people with CFS have not been diagnosed. There's a lot of statistics on this website. I'm also going to just talk a little bit about we could get into possible causes. So they say that they have not identified a cause for it on the CDC. However, there's a lot of data that's coming out that it's related to viruses like Epstein-Barr virus, and 90% of people have Epstein-Barr virus. And so essentially, if you have a virus that's dormant in the body, it can come back and kind of cause some havoc in the body, and Epstein-Barr is one of them. And so that's something that's been linked to CFS. That is something that was happening in my body. And so that's why I got diagnosed with chronic fatigue syndrome. The nice thing is that, a lot of times like things like Epstein-Barr can go dormant again, and it can, your body can recover from that. But unfortunately, there's no cure for CFS or Epstein-Barr virus. And so once things have kind of started to move in that direction, it's harder for your body to come back from it, it sounds like, from what I've been reading, but it's different for everybody. So there's some people that have made really good progress and remissions and like have come out of it in terms of CFS and, are kind of doing better. And then there's some people where they just are debilitated and it's not getting better. It's really different for everybody. I'm mostly sharing this video just to kind of educate a little bit on what I've learned so far about my diagnosis, and then just kind of share what my own personal experience has been with it, because I feel like it's not a commonly known illness. And it's also something where I feel sometimes like I don't know how to explain it to people. But when I go online and I see other people with this diagnosis talking about it, it's really helpful for me. Like it makes me feel not alone. It makes me feel like I'm not crazy. And it makes me feel validated in what my experience has been, even though a lot of us have different experiences with it. And so my hope in making this video is to just kind of share what my personal experience has been, and to just kind of say like, this is what's going on with me with this diagnosis, and hopefully just kind of normalize it, and also bring awareness to it in the sense that there's a whole group of us out here living with this in a way that sucks. Like it's just really unfortunate. So symptoms, I guess the post-exertional malaise is the one that I experience probably the worst out of most of them, outside of just pain. But these are called core. Let's just read this. So core symptoms, 3 primary symptoms are required for diagnosis. greatly lowered ability to do activities that were usual before the illness. This drop in activity level occurs with fatigue and must last 6 months or longer. People with CFS have fatigue that is very different from just being tired. The fatigue of CFS can be severe, is not a result of unusually difficult activity, is not relieved by sleep or rest, was not a problem before becoming ill, not lifelong. Worsening of CFS symptoms after physical or mental activity that would not have caused a problem before illness. This is known as post-exertional malaise. People with CFS often describe this experience as a crash, relapse, or collapse. During PEM, any CFS symptoms may get worse or first appear, including difficulty thinking, problem sleeping, sore throat, headaches, feeling dizzy, or severe tiredness. It may take days, weeks, or longer to recover from a crash. Sometimes patients may be housebound or even completely bedbound during crashes. People with CFS may not be able to predict what will cause a crash or how long it will last. So example, a child's school event may leave someone housebound for a couple of days and not able to do needed tasks like laundry. Shopping at the grocery store may cause a physical crash that requires a nap in the car. So this started to happen to me pretty regularly. I was starting to feel some of this stuff in 2019. And now if I'm at the grocery store and I have to do like an actual grocery haul, I'm screwed. Like it totally messes me up. I can definitely go in the store and grab a couple things and leave without it being too severe, but it does take it out of me. Like running errands and going and doing little things like that really takes it out of me. So if I'm doing that stuff, a lot of times once I'm done, I'm at least spending a couple hours in bed afterwards. I Instacart. I don't go to the store anymore. And so occasionally I'll go to the store if I'm feeling up to it or good. I do like to, go to the farmer's market once a month, but I try to be really in and out. And I've noticed that if I am like at the grocery store and I'm like, oh, I came in for a couple things, but then I realize I need this and I need that. And it turns into like a whole cart. I am going to flare up and have to stay in bed after that. So a lot of times if I'm doing something, I need bed rest afterwards. Taking a shower might leave someone bedbound and unable to do anything for days. So luckily for me, I'm on the mild to moderate side of chronic fatigue syndrome. So I'm not experiencing the severity that some people experience. Some people can barely leave bed. Some people are in wheelchair. Some people need to be fed by somebody else. I'm not that bad. I can feed myself. I can shower. A lot of times though, if I'm doing those things, I need to go lay down afterwards. So it's not uncommon for me to take a shower and then need to go lay down, but even just 5 or 10 minutes, and then I kind of feel a little bit better. What it feels like is it feels like dizziness, fatigue, and I actually have really bad nausea now. So a lot of times I'll get nauseous and need to just like drink some water and lay down. Keeping up with work may lead to spending evenings and weekends recovering from the effort. So this started to happen to me where the work that I was doing was starting to flare my body up to the point where I was feeling like I was going to throw up. So I was getting nauseous, headaches. I have a lot of pain in my body from a past injury. And so from like my neck down and also down through my legs, I get like shooting pain, muscle spasms. I get a lot of chronic pain in my shoulders and in my low back where I have an injury, bowel issues. I have IBS too. So, if my nervous system starts to get a little bit dysregulated, that will trigger the IBS. But the thing that's frustrating about chronic fatigue syndrome is that even if my nervous system feels regulated, I'll still get a flare up. And then sometimes the anxiety I get from the flare up will then trigger the IBS. So it's kind of like turned into this little annoying cycle. But if I can keep my nervous system regulated, it definitely helps with that. Sleep problems. So I will say that I was somebody as a young person way before I had chronic fatigue syndrome. When I was normal and fine, I had sleep issues. The interesting thing is that since I've had chronic fatigue syndrome, I actually don't have any issues with sleep. So this is one of those symptoms that does not apply to me. I get 10 hours of sleep. I sleep fine most of the time. If it's a new moon or a full moon or an eclipse, I'm not sleeping very well. But outside of that, I just sleep pretty good. So sleep is not an issue for me. Problems with thinking and memory. This has been something that's happened to me. My memory's gotten a lot worse, and also my speech. I suffer from brain fog, worsening of symptoms while standing or sitting upright, orthostatic intolerance. So this is happening to me: lightheaded, dizzy, weak, faint. I have vertigo almost on a daily basis. If it's not vertigo, it's dizziness. So that's something that's really common for me. Seeing spots and blurring vision. actually started for me prior to this diagnosis being as severe as it is. Like prior to 2020, I was starting to have some of that stuff happen. So it's interesting because it's kind of like what happened for me, I feel like has been a slow burn. Like I basically have had some other diagnoses that happened prior that were a lot more mild that I feel like kind of segued into what's happening now. So I'm just going to give a quick background on me with some things. If you already know me, this is probably pretty boring, but if you don't know me, this is helpful somewhat, I'm sure. But when I was 24, obtained a back injury that I didn't get any medical attention for. And I started experiencing a lot of chronic pain in a way where I stopped doing a lot of activities because of it. But prior to that, I was doing pretty well. So I got the injury, kind of self-healed myself, got an IBS diagnosis, and then I decided to just get really health focused and kind of really focus on healing myself. So I got really into my spirituality, really into my fitness, and was doing a lot of things. I am vegan, gluten-free. I went sober. I quit smoking. I got really into fitness and was going to the gym all the time. I was walking anywhere from 6 to 10 miles a day as a professional dog walker. On top of it, I was really into fasting and cleansing and doing, a lot of different kinds of ways of, trying to, get my digestion with my IBS stuff in a really good place. And I would say I did a really good job of all of that, was feeling really good in my body. And I also got really into my spirituality, became a tarot reader and an astrologer. So I was spending every day outside, waking up early, meditating, doing yoga, and then I had a really strong spiritual practice where I did Reiki and, had just kind of like this whole part of my life that was very fulfilling. We move away. COVID, 2020 happens. And I guess I should backtrack. So while I'm doing all this stuff in my life to kind of get my life on track and get really healthy, my back injury was flaring up a lot and it was just really painful. And I was noticing that things were just kind of feeling like they were getting worse. So I decided to start physical therapy, and I met my physical therapist, who I still see and work with, and it was really good for me, super life-changing. She's amazing. She's certified in yoga, Reiki, and Qigong. I started integrating Qigong into my physical therapy and, doing all these good things for my body. And in 2020, I just started to progressively get worse. Exercise started to flare me up. I started to get extremely fatigued, nauseous, pain all over my body, not being able to leave bed. Like it was just bad. And my husband is like watching this happen. We don't know what's going on. I'm kind of freaking out about it. And the first thing I'm thinking is that, this is probably fibromyalgia, because I was doing a lot of research, talking to a lot of friends with like Crohn's, Hashimoto's, different diagnoses. I had clients in the past that had fibromyalgia, and I just felt like I was checking all of the fibromyalgia boxes. And unfortunately, in order to get that diagnosis, there's a lot of lab work that has to get done to rule out other problems. And I also was really open-minded to the fact that being vegan, as long as I had been, might have led to some deficiencies, because I take supplements and I'm really on top of my supplements, but I'm also not somebody that thinks I need to take them every day. And so I'm like a every few days supplement gal, not a everyday supplement gal. And part of that's because supplements in the past have made me nauseous. And so that's my way of mitigating that. And so I was like, it's not totally impossible that I'm having a deficiency where I'm anemic or B12 deficient or, vitamin D deficient, because even a lot of my friends who aren't vegan, who are, like relatively healthy, have B12 or vitamin D deficiencies. Like it's really common. Even people that eat meat. So I was like, I'm vegan, and so it's probably what's happening. I couldn't afford to get the lab work done because we didn't have insurance. And so it took me years of researching and kind of trying to self-diagnose before we got health insurance. And I've just been struggling with these problems up until this year. And then we finally got health insurance, and I was able to get all of the lab work done, which was about $3,000 worth of lab work in order to rule out other things. So I had to get my thyroid tested. I didn't have to get hormones, but I wanted to get my hormonal panel done to see if I had any hormonal imbalances, because that runs in my family. I also had, every autoimmune thing tested, Lyme's disease, rheumatoid arthritis. Also, I had x-rays done on my back. I had a urinology analysis or urinalysis done. And then I also had some tests done for various viruses. And my labs came back really good. I am not deficient in anything. I don't have any thyroid issues, don't have any hormonal imbalances, don't have arthritis. But what did come back was Epstein-Barr virus, which is not uncommon. So I learned that 90% of people have Epstein-Barr virus living dormant in their bodies. If you don't know what Epstein-Barr virus is, it is the virus that causes mono. So if you ever had mono as a kid or in your life, you have the Epstein-Barr virus living in your body. So if you get your blood work done and Epstein-Barr virus comes up, it's like doctors are just like, yeah, I have it. Everybody has it. But one of the things that they found more in recent data is that people with chronic fatigue syndrome, there tends to be a link between that and antibodies in the body that seem to be activated because of the virus. And that's why a lot of people with long COVID are also getting chronic fatigue syndrome diagnoses right now, which is interesting. So my doctor explained all of that to me because that's the only thing that came up in my labs. And she diagnosed me with chronic fatigue syndrome. I knew what chronic fatigue syndrome was, but I didn't think that that's what was happening to me. I thought it was just fibromyalgia because I'm doing so well. And most people that I've read about with chronic fatigue syndrome are on the moderate to severe side of things, where they're completely bedridden and need a wheelchair and have been to the hospital numerous times. And none of that's happened for me outside of the bedbound thing. I've definitely had a lot of days where I'm staying in bed most of the day, but I can still get up and do things for myself. I can still feed myself. I can still shower. I can still help my dogs out and do things like that. There's been a couple days where my vertigo was so bad that I had to have my husband help me out. There's one day where I was completely bedbound for my vertigo, but for the most part, like I've been doing really well. So with chronic fatigue syndrome, there's supposedly 3 types of chronic fatigue syndrome that are by severity. So it's mild, moderate, severe. And based off of my research that I've done about it, I would consider myself in the mild to moderate category because it's kind of dependent on the day. Like some days I don't even feel like I have an illness and I'll just be like, is this really all in my head? And then the next day, like I'll do a bunch of stuff because I feel good. And then the next day, the post-exertional malaise will happen where I get a flare up and I am bedbound. Like I basically need to stay home and stay in bed. So that's how it feels. It's very like this for me, where I have a lot of good days and I also have a lot of bad days. Sometimes I'll have a string of good days and it's usually followed up by a string of bad days. And so what happens is that it's kind of like if you were to take a glass of water, like if, we use this jar of Topo Chico or this bottle of Topo Chico, and it's like every single little thing I do, I'm like emptying out some of the Topo Chico and it's never replenished. So it's like back when I was, pre these problems, even if I was tired, because the fatigue syndrome is not the same as being tired. So it's like, you could look at the symptoms of fibromyalgia or chronic fatigue syndrome, and a lot of people probably could read that and identify with it because it's kind of like vague in a lot of ways, like muscle aches and pains, and then, being tired and exhausted. But the difference is that before this, it was almost like even if I was tired, I still could do things in a way where it made me feel good. Where I was like, oh, like I'm feeling kind of tired and lazy, but I really need to go to the gym or go on a walk. So then I go to the gym or I go on a walk and I'd feel really good afterwards and get that endorphin high. And I'd be like, oh, I'm so glad that I pushed through it and I did it. This is not that. So what happens now is that if I do something that I used to really enjoy, even when I was tired, even when I was in pain, like one of the things that happened to me with my physical therapy was before all this stuff started, I had a whole set of physical therapy stuff that I was doing that really helped my body. And as these symptoms got worse, if I would go and do that thing, it actually would flare me up. So, like rolling on my foam roller occasionally will flare me up. A lot of times it makes me feel good, but now sometimes it makes me feel worse. I get sick, I get nauseous, and then I am in more pain, and my vertigo gets triggered. So my physical therapist, being amazing, when I started to believe that I had fibromyalgia, she redid my entire plan around somebody that has those issues. I try to do some Pilates this year, same thing, like things that used to make me feel really strong and really like I'm getting fit and this is good for me, now makes me feel like I want to puke, and it makes me feel sick, and it makes my whole body hurt, and I'm usually spending days recovering from it. The only thing that's really been still beneficial for me, and I have had days where it flares me up, but for the most part, it's the least bad, is walking. Thank God, because walking is like really important to me. But there are days where I've made myself walk and it wasn't a good call. So luckily I can still do it most of the time, but I have to just be really mindful with that. So a few things about chronic fatigue syndrome that I think is important for people who are watching to know if you are unfamiliar with it is that it's not psychosomatic. So psychosomatic illness is something that is related to stress and our mental state. So if you have a psychosomatic illness, a lot of times if you do things to regulate your nervous system or help your mental state, it helps your symptoms. And unfortunately with chronic fatigue syndrome, that's not been the case. So it's not a psychosomatic illness, it's an organic illness. And so even if you have a positive mental state, or you're regulating your nervous system, or you're meditating and doing all these things, it does not guarantee that you are going to not experience your symptoms. And I think that's been the hardest part for me, is that coming from a holistic belief system and background, as somebody who's done a lot of spiritual work and who loves Qigong and Reiki, Joe Dispenza, this quantum kind of physics stuff, very like, if you heal the mind, you heal the body, and vice versa, like the way that all that stuff is connected, and being somebody that's very into that stuff and meditating, not saying it doesn't help me, like that stuff is always going to help me, but it doesn't keep my symptoms at bay. It doesn't change the fact that this is stuff that happens. And so that's the part that, when you're navigating an illness like this, and you're kind of in certain social circles with people that have a mindset that's empowering in the sense that your health is in your hands and that you can do all this, self-healing, it's really frustrating to have an illness where that stuff isn't working and you're feeling like a failure, like you're doing it wrong after you've been doing it for years and having a lot of success. And so it's kind of like I'm trying really hard not to throw the baby out with the bathwater and give up on things that I enjoy, because I've already given up on so much. I used to do yoga every day. Don't do that anymore. I used to work. I haven't worked since October 31st. I try to do some of the work that I used to do. Like I've done some training sessions with animals for fun. And I've also done some readings, like astrology readings for fun for people. And I enjoy those things, but the amount of planning that has to go around it for me, I have to make sure that I have a day after, at least one day, if not a couple, where I know I'm going to get to be in bed all day afterwards, because I know that post-exertional malaise is going to come in and knock me down, and I'm going to be in pain. Like I feel immense amount of pain in my body, fatigue. I feel like I'm going to throw up. I feel nauseous. It's just a lot. It's a lot. And so it's been really hard and really frustrating to navigate, because even though you can look normal and look like everything's fine, a lot of times it's not. And so, like at concerts, it's hard for me if I have to stand the entire time. So going to shows and being out in social situations where I know I'm gonna have to do a lot of standing is not very fun. Being in a group environment is very draining for me, even if I want to be there. So it's really, that's the thing that's hard. It's like when I'm reading a lot of things about boundaries and rest and only saying yes to things that you want to do to help yourself feel better, it doesn't work that way. Even if I genuinely want to do it, if my heart wants to do it, if my brain wants to do it, it's still going to knock me on my ass, because it's not psychosomatic. So that's something that I'm still, you know, trying to navigate and just be okay with. And I'm really fortunate that I have more of the mild case of this because I am able to do things I want to do. I had a very busy summer. I went out of town a lot. I drove myself places where I know there's a lot of people with this diagnosis that are not able to do that. But I have had instances when I'm doing those things where I'm nervous because I'll start to get pain starting in my body, or I'll start to feel a flare up. And the first thought I have is, am I going to be able to get myself home? And luckily, so far I've been able to do that. But I know that with what I've read and what I know about other people, that it's possible that I could end up in the emergency room or in a situation where I'm not able to physically get myself somewhere that I need to go if this gets worse. And so that's kind of the part that makes me nervous and why I'm trying so hard to continue to stay really healthy and do the things that make me happy and I know that help me. But, you know, it's hard because you start to feel very uninspired to do things because you just know you're looking forward to how bad it's going to make you feel later. And even though I'm trying to get myself out of that mindset, it's just the reality. And so it's hard when you have this reality that you're operating within, where I've tried to like convince myself it's not going to happen. I'm like, well, if I really get excited about it and I really want to do it, it won't happen maybe. Like I try to do the psychosomatic stuff where it's like convincing my brain that my body is not going to have this reaction. Sometimes I feel like it's working. I've had bouts of where I've pushed through and done things where I feel like it's working, and then the post exertional malaise will start to happen and I just feel so awful. I'm like, okay, there it is. And so I just can't seem to get away from that ever. And that's okay. Like, that's just the reality of living with chronic fatigue syndrome. And I'm just getting to a point where I'm trying to live alongside it because I feel like it's already taken so much from me. Like, I've completely let go of who I was trying to be in my life prior to this. I had a lot of goals. I wanted to open a dog training facility and I wanted to have a pretty large business out here. And the idea of doing that, I can't even fathom. Like, there's no way that I could handle that right now. I can barely handle doing astrology readings for people anymore. And like, as I'm doing this video, like this entire shoulder is like, this whole shoulder throughout the day has been starting to act up. That was something that came back in my x-rays too, is that I have a shoulder injury that I didn't know about, that where like one of my shoulders, my right shoulder is like moved 2 millimeters closer to my spine than it's supposed to be in. And I also have a lumbar fusion in my S1 and L5, I think it is. So I definitely have like the back stuff going on. And, you know, I've been in physical therapy for 4 or 5 years. So I feel like I'm doing everything that I know how to do and that I can do. So it just is what it is, you know, like it's just part of being alive and human. So I'm trying to navigate that. But yeah, I think that the point of me making this video was really that I just kind of wanted to bring awareness to chronic fatigue syndrome and also just kind of share what my personal experience has been in navigating it this year. And really, it's been happening for 4 years and it's just progressively gotten worse, but also better. I will say that I'm an advocate for medical medium protocol. I was very skeptical of it, but when I didn't have insurance and was feeling really desperate for just a solution to try, I did do the cleanse to heal protocol every single month for a year, and it helped me so much. I'm not of the ilk that you have to have celery juice in its pure form every day. So I hate celery. So I stopped doing the celery juice and I actually have my own juice that I make that's pineapple based. I do like turmeric and a bunch of anti-inflammatory stuff with it. And I do my own version of medical medium protocol, which is basically like a vegan raw detox cleanse. But I will say that out of everything that I've read in Western medicine and everything holistically that I know helps me, medical medium makes the most sense. And I know so many people hate him from the Western standpoint because he's looked at as a quack or kind of woo. But the way that he approaches a lot of this chronic illness stuff it makes sense to me because he's not saying that it's psychosomatic. He's not saying that it's all in your head. He's not doing this kind of like spiritual bypassing, like you have the power to heal yourself through changing your thoughts, because with a lot of these chronic illnesses, we don't like, it's not like, yes, that helps. Like, obviously our mental state helps our body heal, duh. But he's also very much saying that viruses like Epstein-Barr and multiple viruses, and then toxins in the environment are also a part, and mold in the environment are a part of these chronic illnesses. And scientifically, that is being proven. That is true. Mold, chemicals, and viruses are causing a lot of these chronic illnesses. And that's why I was diagnosed with chronic fatigue syndrome, was because of Epstein-Barr virus. And medical medium protocol is catered towards that whole thing. That Epstein-Barr virus is one of the main things he talks about. And so the fact that I didn't know that I had Epstein-Barr virus and didn't know that I had chronic fatigue syndrome, and I did his protocol because I thought I had fibromyalgia, and that his protocol helped me immensely. You know, I don't like following, like, I don't like to idol worship. So I am not a idol worship person with him, but I am pro vegan, being vegan, and I am pro vegan raw diets as ways that you cleanse your body. Like, I used to do a fruit cleanse for 3 days when I was starting to feel funky in my body, and that would always help me. And I would do it like every couple months. And so I think that there's something to doing vegan raw cleanses where you still eat. It's like a lot of people think cleansing and fasting is the same, and it's not. A fast is when you're not eating anything and you're like sticking to some kind of liquid. But a cleanse is like, you can have food, you're just not eating certain things. And so on the medical medium cleanses, you eat a lot of food. There's a lot of food in it. It's just, you can't, I mean, it's all raw vegan. You don't eat any kind of fats or oils or anything like that. So the food is really not that flavorful. And, you know, by the end of the cleanse, you taste totally different. Like, you're like, wow, onions and lettuce have a powerful flavor, but in the beginning it feels really bland. But I'm going to start doing more cleanses again because I stopped doing them this year, just out of curiosity. And I think I was doing better when I had that in my life. And so after the holidays, I'm planning on getting back to a regular cleanse routine that is kind of my own concoction of medical medium stuff. Because I'm, like I said, not, there's certain things that he has in there that I just kind of change out for things that I like better, that I feel good doing. So that's kind of been my path with it. But I do really like my primary care doctor. And there are still some more tests that I have to get done for my blood cell count. But for the most part, when I got all of my labs done, they were so good. Like, I don't have any, like, I am a very healthy person on paper. I'm a very healthy vegan, doing all of that stuff right. I'm really glad that that's the case, because I think that's why this isn't worse. I think that if I was eating and drinking in a way that was not good for me, I might have ended up being a hospital or wheelchair bound person, you know? So I feel like the fact that I'm vegan, gluten-free, alcohol-free, cigarette-free, all of that stuff is why this is not as bad as it could be. But having it even in a mild way has completely changed my life. I'm trying to really lean into the Lady of Leisure as an archetype that I'm okay with, but it's really hard. As somebody that was like I would work 6 to 7 days a week, 12-hour days, and I loved it. And I had my career, I had the things that I was working on, and I really loved pouring myself into my work all the time. I love being busy. I love being super active. I love being really fit, going to the gym, doing all those things. And I can't do that stuff anymore. And so it's really challenging to accept that. And I'm trying to find different versions of that stuff that make me happy. So having my YouTube channel and trying to just like do my horoscopes and talk about things on here, and potentially starting a podcast, and also just going on walks as often as I can, you know, kind of keeping myself busy with painting. Like, I've been really into painting lately, and just finding things that I can physically do in a way that brings me joy, that's not going to flare me up as bad as other things, has been kind of my focus. But, you know, it's interesting when you learn about this stuff, because we don't really talk about it outside of these circles, like now that I'm in this camp, you know, of course there's support groups and lots of people like me living this existence and they're all talking about it. But until you become a part of this world, nobody really wants to talk about it or hear about it. And I think that's been the hardest part for me, is watching the amount of isolation that I've experienced since it started and just seeing kind of who cares and who doesn't. Like, and I don't really blame anybody. It's not fun. You know, I'm not as fun to be around as I used to be. So I get it, but it still hurts. Like, it's still hard to go from being a very social and active person to like feeling like I just have to be really mindful with how I exert myself, because socializing takes it out of me. Like being out in public is draining in a way that is next level. So it's just hard. I mean, just being on YouTube and doing this is really draining. Like I'm going to spend the rest of the day in bed after this for sure. So yeah, it's an interesting thing to navigate. But anyways, I guess I could stop there and just say thanks for listening. And if you have friends in your life who are chronically ill, check in on them, and you know, don't offer them advice, just check in, just listen, just let them vent, let them listen, and or you know, let them kind of, you know, share with you what they're going through, and try not to say, have you, like, the worst thing for me that people can suggest is dietary stuff, because chances are I've already done it or I am doing it. And it's just not diet related. Like nothing about what I'm going through is diet related. So it's just not helpful. Obviously, like the medical medium stuff is very diet focused in terms of what you're cutting out. But even when I do those cleanses and they help, it like I'm not cured. Like it's not like it goes away. It's just I have a little bit more pep in my step. And honestly, what it is I don't gain weight as fast, which is what I really enjoy, because I've put on a lot of weight since not being able to be as active. And I feel like the medical medium cleanse helps me maintain a healthier weight. And it also gets me it gets my cravings in a better place for healthier options that in turn are just better for me anyways. But I've definitely had times on the cleanse where I'm still experiencing the symptoms of chronic fatigue syndrome and fibromyalgia in a severe way. And I've ended the cleanses early because of that, where I'm like, this doesn't feel like it's helping as much. But if I look back, I do feel like I was in a better place when I was doing them than I am now. So I'm going to try to get that integrated back into my life more consistently again. He's got a book called Cleanse to Heal, if you haven't heard of it. And there's a cleanse called the 369 cleanse. And that's the cleanse that I was doing that I like. But yeah, anyways, I guess I will end there. I do horoscope videos every month for the Sober Curator and my personal blog, ladyofleisure.com. If you liked this, or you are also suffering from chronic fatigue syndrome, let me know in the comments what your experience has been like. If you watch this and you don't have any experience with chronic fatigue syndrome, feel free to comment or hit like, subscribe, but please don't give me any advice. I don't need that. And yeah, I hope that if you watch this and you're experiencing chronic illness, I just hope it made you feel a little bit less alone. And if chronic fatigue syndrome is new to you, I hope it at least educated you about something going on in some of our lives that a lot of people don't understand or really know about. And yeah, it's interesting. It's an interesting illness, and very upset about it. And I hope that we all find ways to overcome life's obstacles that empower us and help us find what we're here to do, I guess. All right, I will post more about this stuff if it's something people seem interested in the future, and I will talk to y'all later.